Today, we begin our work by considering why this discipleship pathway is so important for our church family right now. I'd like to start with a simple exercise. Just close your eyes for a moment and remember the communities of your childhood. It was a slower, simpler time, wasn't it? If you're like me, you see churches on every corner, no homework or ball practice on Wednesday nights because that's church night. Sunday was church day all day. You went in the morning, you went again at night. You ate Sunday dinner at home with or with friends because nothing was open on Sundays. No restaurants, no stores. Your pastor had a whole column in the newspaper every single week, and people read it with reverence and respect. It often slipped over to the front page when serious matters were discussed. Everyone you knew went to church, and we all dressed properly for it. Our churches were the heart of our communities. The church buildings were shared freely as civic centers and gymnasiums and community gathering places. When the leaders of our communities needed to gather the people for an important discussion, why, their first thought was to call the pastor and ask for the biggest sanctuary in town. The church ladies would make the coffee, start up the cookies, and put on a fine spread. The cross on the altar table stood over the people as the mayor spoke, maybe the police chief, even the governor. The people wrestled with difficult issues. They solved complicated problems and literally crossed aisles to compromise. When it was over, the mayor called on the pastor to have a benediction, and it was just as likely that the organist would start up, "O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come." Finger sandwiches, punch, and cookies were shared in the fellowship hall, and we all went home feeling really good about our towns and cities and especially each other. What you're remembering, what even I'm remembering growing up in a small West Tennessee town in the 80s and 90s, is what some social scientists and theologians call Christendom. Christendom was the age of the church. It's been a real thing, but it's not a biblical description of any kind, and it hasn't necessarily been a really good thing. Depending on who you ask, it started about the time Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Holy Roman Empire. The year was about 381 AD. The Church of Jesus Christ, especially in the Western world, enjoyed ever-increasing power, status, and wealth. There were seasons when bishops and popes had way more power than kings and queens. In the Western world, the agenda of the culture was set in the pews of the church, whether for good or bad. And we've been both very good and very bad. Like anything else, Christendom has ebbed and flowed over the generations. Times of crisis drove people back to the church for comfort and security. Times of comfort and security swung the pendulum of influence ever so slightly away from the church until the next crisis. Still, the cross and the steeple stood high above the flag over the courthouse. And every pastor knew deep in his heart, when the next crisis comes, we'll fling open the doors and ring the bells, and the people will come streaming back in. It always works. It has always worked. Well, about 15 or 20 years ago, it stopped working. The age of Christendom came to a close, and really nobody noticed. Even we church people didn't notice. The once grand influence and power of the church slipped away. The new hearts of our communities are the ball field, Walmart, Facebook. We ring our bells and fling open our doors, and nobody comes. We wonder where they are. We put up signs and printed brochures. We spend thousands of dollars on advertising. Some say, oh, they're all at the megachurch. No, they really are not. On any given Sunday morning, there are 100,000 people in Murfreesboro who choose not to be part of our many worshiping communities. The age of Christendom, whatever it was, has come to a close. During this pandemic, I've talked with many of our folks who are carrying much anger and frustration right now. We're frustrated with government, schools, institutions of all kinds, and each other. We're angry. We're angry with the pastor, with the church leaders, with our neighbors, with each other. But what I keep hearing in these many conversations is really a kind of a misplaced grief. It has taken us a decade, but we're finally realizing this age of the church, this Christendom, is gone. The agenda of the culture is no longer set in the pews of our churches. Our young people, our older people, our middle-aged people, well, they are wandering away in record numbers because the form of religion, which seemed to work so well for so long, isn't working anymore. And it may not have been working very well for a long time. We aren't really frustrated or angry. Our hearts are broken, and we're scared to death. Partly because the image of church we've held so dear has slipped away, and partly because the image of church we've held so dear may have, in some ways, introduced a kind of a shadow gospel that hasn't always had the heart of the true gospel of Jesus Christ. Whatever the case, we stand here now on a precipice, looking into a future that is very different than our past. It's quite unsettling, and we must think carefully together about it.